Welcome to the 12th station. This is Jim Maughan, and I'm with my good friend and cohort, Mr. Bug Hall.
Howdy, y'all.
Bug, we all see it. Young men today, certainly not all young men, of course, but are not progressing as they have historically. There's a marked difference in their ability to achieve in the world. For purposes of this video, we're calling it prolonged adolescence in young men. Call it Peter Pan theory, failure to launch, the man-child, whatever. In Italy, Bug, bet you didn't know this. They even have a name for it, and it's very, very common. It's called mamoni, and I've seen it firsthand. Which is loosely translated as a mama's boy, right? It's a very real phenomenon. I mean, it's actually kind of pathetic. There's this army of young men who still live in mom's house. She cooks and does their laundry. We're talking guys in their 40s, for crying out loud. They have no intention of getting married. Why should they? And they sit out on the piazza all day, catcalling tourist women, and there's no intention of taking on responsibility of a family, etc. And I just want to get your thoughts on this. Let's start there, and then we'll take it in terms of we'll break it down, and then we'll talk about solutions.
Yeah, well, rolling it back to the highest level. In the last episode, we talked about the sins of Adam, particularly the one sin he committed that Eve did not commit, which was dereliction of duty, right? Capitulation of his responsibility. And God gave to him the punishment that was going to bring about a correction in that, which was to toil and in thistles and thorns, right? So the idea there is that it's only through pain and responsibility that a man is made. There's no other route to it. You can't intellectualize your way to masculinity. It's simply pain and responsibility. Bishop Fulton Sheen actually talks about that as well. And I think you see that dichotomy really well in some men who have come into the faith. They've come in late. And for those of us who have had families and who have, sort of been living a, let's call it a life of responsibility for any number of, years, you see that there is a difference, right? Because even though they have the intellectual part of masculinity and the faith, they haven't quite appropriated to themselves the pain and or responsibility that takes that final leap, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, our culture is specifically designed in a way to infringe on young men's ability to mature. We've got a million things against us in the culture. Why should we? Right? Our nature is inclined towards the easy path, and there's any number of things in front of us that are just easier, right? I mean, I used to play a lot of video games, for instance. I mean, I could go 10 hours without thinking of a single responsibility. And obviously there's the pornography problem. There's the entertainment problem, right? Entertainment is cheap and easily accessible for a very small discounted price of however much a month. You have an endless supply of movies and TV shows available to you.
Right.
And furthermore, those movies and TV shows have now propagandized the idea that responsibility or what toxic masculinity is problematic to begin with. So young men are trained from an early age to believe that that there is no such thing as masculinity. It's a social construct. So why try, right? And schools push that issue really hard as well. The majority of Americans, the majority of Western culture is raised by the public system. They aren't really raised, even, and this is a hard thing to say, but even good parents aren't really raising their kids. They're allowing the school system to do it, right? Those kids are there for 8-10 hours a day, whatever. And whatever propaganda is pushed forth there during their formative years. And we're talking about especially the sort of kindergarten to middle school.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. All psychologists say this, even secular psychologists, they all say the same thing. The formative years are basically, 1 year old to about 6 years old. What you believe, what you are taught to believe in that time frame is very much, and of course, grace can overcome that, but that's very much what you believe the rest of your life. What's set in there is what you hold to, without the interference of grace.
You know who else said that? The Jesuits.
That's right.
Back when they were good.
back when they were still the top dogs theologically, they very much so put forth that theory that those are the formative years. So what do schools do now?
Yes.
Schools teach boys that they are defective girls.
Right.
Right. And that's a phrase that a lot of people use, and I think it's accurate. Your natural inclination to work problems out amongst yourselves, even in rough and tumble type scenarios, has now been taught that there's an intrinsic problem there. Right. I remember when I was a kid, we used to get in fights, boys fight.
Sure.
And then it was almost overnight that suddenly schools had this new mandate to call the police. If you got in a simple fist fight, nothing egregious, just a normal old fist fight with, Billy down the road, even if it happened at the bus stop, which was technically the school's jurisdiction, you'd show up and the truants officer would be there and they would literally arrest you and make a big show of it, right? And parade you through the school and out.
Yeah, the perp walk.
The perp walk right through the school, right? So,
lovely.
And boys have more energy, right? They're really not meant to sit in one place.
No.
For 8 hours a day. It's not conducive to their nature. They need activity.
Sorry. Please forgive the interruption. Have you seen the stock market this last week? Many are losing sleep over their vulnerability with current markets, inflation, and the insane current monetary and fiscal policies. Our sponsor, St. Joseph Partners, is in the business of helping you own physical precious metals to protect your wealth. What about protecting your wealth in, say, retirement plans? If you've considered gold IRAs before, you may have been surprised at the standard costs. After all, we are dealing with real assets as opposed to digits on your screen. St. Joseph Partners is offering free setup to 12-station customers. We waive that cost completely and are offering free first-year admin fees. We serve more than the retirement market as well. Perhaps you may have wanted to add some gold to, or begin diversifying or add to your position. We will step you through the process and make it easy. We don't sell high premium collector coins that bury investors like the firms you see advertised on mainstream media. We sell bullion, served close to spot, sold close to spot, and that will begin benefiting as gold moves higher. Lastly, if you know any friends or family members who are in the market for metals, send them our way. We'll send you a gift of some precious metals for the referral to thank you. Nothing has protected wealth like gold over the centuries, weathering every storm imaginable. The timing seems urgent to be sure to be properly diversified. If your financial advisor talks you out of physical metals, get him and us on the phone together. We think you'll learn a lot, and just to see how superficial, if not negligent, the arguments are from the financial advisors who chronically fail to allocate clients to gold and other precious metals. Anyway, St. Joseph Partners, that's www.stjosephpartners.com or 610-326-2000. Now back to our show. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think, it's an interesting byproduct, and your opinion on this. During COVID, you know what happened was, for the first time, parents got to see what was going on these Zoom calls. And, we saw it in Loudoun County, Virginia, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought that was very, very interesting because on the one hand, I think, it's kind of sad you didn't know that. I mean, I'm always paying attention to this stuff, and because it's very, very important. But on the other hand, I found the backlash interesting. They really, these people they got angry.
Yeah, it was funny because when the whole COVID shutdowns very first happened, when the schools shut down, there were a lot of people on the conservative side who were angry with my commentary because I kept saying, good, leave them shut down. These things have been...
No, not you, man.
They've been a bane, to our existence for a long time. They have been the number one propaganda machine that has emasculated young boys. And quite frankly, I'm happy with them being shut down. And the reality is, what's really cool is a lot of people out of necessity have moved to homeschooling, have moved to alternative means, and they wouldn't have otherwise. So look, God gets good out of everything. I say shut the schools down and be done with them. They're not helping anyone.
No. interesting sort of segue. You and I, it's kind of cool because when we do these things, we come out there we do our own research, we think about it, we come on here, with our different things. I put together sort of a list of what I think, a broad brush stroke, but still a list. And with your leave, I'll kind of go through these. Yeah, this is basically.
Give us the facts.
Give us the facts, Mr. Maughan. So, Bug, seriously, like, this is really cool. So, Bug and I talk, obviously. And, I was saying to you, it's very interesting. The algorithms, there used to be all sorts of articles like this that would be easy to read up on. Oh, no. They were buried, And so I actually thought for quite a while, and I put together my own. Because to me, and by the way, wasn't a lot of work because it was so obvious. So here's what I came up with, right? You already discussed this, education. The education model, and I'd like to point out both public, private, and Catholic schools, boys are treated as defective girls. You said that. You're absolutely right. The teachers are overwhelmingly liberal. Okay, now you think this is an opinion? You're wrong. The teachers are all part of the union, okay, and then just as a fact from the Pacific Research Institute, there are 90 Democrats for every 10 Republicans. You want to start breaking it down into, let's say, English teachers? 97 for every 3 Republicans. Overwhelmingly Democrat. And I would continue with a truckload of facts, but it's obvious. Our boys and girls are getting indoctrinated by ideologues, and they have an agenda. And the agenda is firmly entrenched in leftist ideology. There is no question. Now, point 2, pursue any course catalog of any major education university, right? And you will find yourself swimming in an ocean of hard left ideology, right? You will universally see critical theory as a coursework. Critical theory was invented by Karl Marx. There's no truth. There's only power. Intersectionality, that says you're not allowed to be right about anything unless you're on our side, basically. Then you just shut up. Basically it's a cheerleading for every fashionable left-leaning cause. Now, another reason, having to do all this, and we talked about this in the past, no fathers in the home. 40% of children who are school age do not have fathers in the home. Don't think boys need fathers. Fathers teach boys to be men, right? And girls need fathers as well. And these statistics are undeniable. Number 3, make them addicted to entertainment and avoid hard work. Again, you and I have talked about this, Bug. I shouldn't even talk about this. I'm going to let you talk about it because you had a front row seat. But suffice to say, entertainment and art are enormous contributors to the beliefs in our culture. They really are. And since we have effectively canceled God, a God that makes demands of us, this is no small point. And again, you got to pick this up because you have a lot to say about this. And I just want to say one more thing and then I'll hand it back to you. But just as a slight, as an overview of this, I mean, really think of fathers portrayed on TV. Al Bundy, Homer Simpson. I mean, this new genre of dads, and they're all portrayed the same way. Condescending eye rolls from the wife. He's dumb, incompetent, mostly selfish, actually. It's kind of an oaf, but his family loves him anyway. Again, not a small point. The current psychological maxims, right? The American Psychological Association released a report. This is one of the things I thought of. Whereas, one of the biggest takeaways of this report alludes to the crisis of masculinity as being traditional masculinity, marked by, this is the crisis because we've got to stop this, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is, on the whole, harmful. You talked about that with fighting before. So just a couple more, I'm going to hand it back over. The schools we send our kids to are fundamentally opposed to masculinity. Again, to use your point, gender is a social construct. 40% of these kids have no fathers when they get home. Then when they get home after 7 hours of indoctrination, they turn on the TV to have masculinity disparaged at every turn. Then they pause for a dopamine hit, right? And that dopamine hit is, guess what? A lot of times it's porn or it's video games, right? All of these things designed to not challenge the man to grow. You think about just that one fact, right? Men pursuing in an appropriate way a young lady to date, right? Well, guess what? That's hard. That's really difficult. You have to risk rejection. You got to man up. We've all done it. It's not easy. And the point is, well, now in the bunkered down lives that we have, well, you don't really have to do that anymore. You get that same dopamine hit. Anyway, that's what I came up with. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I want to roll backwards through a lot of those.
Sure.
So, first of all, you talk about men pursuing women. I noticed years ago this new trend where not only do men expect the women to sort of put in most of the work, they're frozen. That when I was a kid, I remember that if you liked a girl, you would talk with your friends about what the best way to approach her was.
Yeah.
And then you'd go in for the kill, right?
Right.
The reality is when people bring their problems to me, and they often do for some reason, what I often hear is, I don't know if she likes me. I don't know. She hasn't given me any signs that she likes me. She hasn't really shown any interest. Well, women are naturally inclined to not make themselves vulnerable unless there is some sort of reward for that, right?
Yes.
And the reward being a masculine man who is genuinely pursuing them, for right intention. So the reality is, and that's just part of the problem. You can roll that back further. You talked about the dopamine hit. After the drudgery of being indoctrinated, you're despaired, right? You need that dopamine hit, and so it's very often porn, video games,
Right.
And a little further back in time, I'd say it was the old sports ball on TV, right?
Sure.
But here's the thing: the entertainment that has crept into the culture and has become basically our bread and circus, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of that would have been accepted if men were being raised to be men. And so the very first thing was removing fathers from the home and putting boys into the school system where their inclinations towards masculinity are foiled. What happens in that, and this is I think the most important point in the issue. What happens in that is these young boys know that something is wrong. They don't know what it is, but they're confused by it, and they ultimately despair, right? And so you get two different approaches to that despair. You get the young, disenfranchised, antisocial behavior, the young boys who basically think, well, none of this is worth it, but I have an inclination towards this this rougher attitude, right? And so I'm going to lash out. I'm going to go make trouble where I can, right? I'm going to find groups who embrace my roughness, and so you end up running in bad circles. That's one application. The other application is let's call them the soy boys, right? The ones who they also despair, and they also realize there's nothing for them in this society. So they actually do try to appropriate the female version of life, right? The softer, encouraging feminism. You see these guys; they encourage every feminine era, humanism, right? They very much so embrace the humanist side of things, and start rejecting any idea that there's such a thing as just war or appropriate application of masculinity in and of itself. Both of those groups are now inclined towards easy life, and so entertainment is now something that they're interested in. If you look back when men were more men, we weren't sitting around watching 10 hours of TV a day. It was available to us, but I didn't want to watch TV. I wanted to go run outside and go do things. I wanted to be active, right? And
right.
So once they've got them hooked, now they pump them with the entertainment. And the entertainment is problematic because, like you said, it's indoctrination, right? Basically, so I grew up in the entertainment industry, and I've seen a progression from the Homer Simpson, right? Which, if you look at Homer Simpson, he was the test pilot for this sort of mentality, the mentality that father figures are oafish figures. What Homer Simpson had, though, because he was still early in the test run, there was a masculinity to Homer Simpson.
Yes.
The very first episode of The Simpsons was about him trying to fulfill his fatherly duties in getting his children Christmas presents, right? And it was this secret thing that he didn't have the money to give them Christmas presents, and he was trying to solve that problem while they were engaging in the Christmas spirit. And it was this hidden hidden sacrifice that he was trying to make, right?
Yeah.
And Homer Simpson, in a lot of ways, is a really beautiful character early on because you see that again and again and again. There was an episode called All for Her where he finally had enough money saved to quit his job and do his dream job, which was, I think, to run a bowling alley or something. And Marge got pregnant with their third child, and he had to go crawling back to his old job. And at the end of the episode, you see this mural on the wall. His boss put this mural on the wall that said, "You're here forever," because he wanted to remind him not to ever leave again, right? And Homer Simpson covered all the letters with Maggie's pictures so that the letters spelled out, "You're here for her."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
I missed that. I had no idea.
It's a great episode. So they started with the oafishness, still rooted in duty. And then they slowly rolled that back to where you get Modern Family, right? The father in Modern Family has no sense of responsibility. He's a 40-something-year-old teenager, right?
Yes.
And that's the slow indoctrination of the culture. I remember I was working, I had sold a show to Netflix, and we were in the development process, and I had designed the character arcs for Hansel and Gretel in this show. And Hansel was a young boy, and his main character through line was the desire to protect his sister, right? That was meant to be his main through line. He wanted to be adventurous, and he wanted to protect his sister at all costs. And the episode where his arc is really tested is an episode where they're alone in the woods, and he's slowly sort of turning into this beast. And so now his desire to protect her is foiled by himself, right? Because now he's trying to fight off the beast inside him so that his sister isn't harmed. All I heard from the executives on the other side were toxic masculinity. And I found it absurd that this animated character who's 8 years old, this fictional little boy, their main problem with him was that he was a representation of toxic masculinity because he wanted to protect and provide for his sister. And wow. That's across the board, right? That was one experience that I had, but that was essentially across the board. Every aspect of entertainment now is that. Whether you're looking at the Marvel films, there's always things that they have to make sure to put in to foil that idea. And it's even harder in those films, right? Because you have these men who are meant to be heroes, but they have to continually pull that rug out from under them and make sure that these men are not a representation of quote unquote toxic masculinity, that there is not something that's intrinsically masculine about them. It's just their powers, right? It's only their powers that give them the ability to fight evil. And that's a serious evil to try and promote. Because
sure, so that would explain the advent and the increase of female superhero characters with equal abilities, things like that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean that's part of it. But with the female characters, they never have to pull the rug out from under them from a standpoint of character, right?
Okay.
The men, it's very important, and if you watch, you'll see this again and again. It's very important that they represent their powers are what give them the ability to fight evil. When in reality, what do we know as Catholics? It's your character, right? It's your virtue. You will do no good in life unless you are a man of great character, a man of virtue, and then no matter how little power you have, it will be greatly expanded, and you will make changes in the world, whether that's in your personal life or the small sphere around you or the world beyond that, right?
Interesting. Yeah, because I'm not really, I'm not really all that familiar with the Marvel comics sort of genre, but I know it's referenced quite a bit, and I do check in once in a while, so I have a general idea. But very cool. So let me think. Bug, it may be. I think we did a pretty good job of hitting this. I was thinking it may be. Hold on that time. All right. That's the dive symbol there, Bug. So we're going to dive into wow, that was bad. We're going to dive into some solutions because I think a subject like this warrants really, and let me start out by saying this and pick it up. the solutions is to avoid really tackle willful blindness.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? How have you missed this stuff?
Right. Yeah.
I had been, look, as I said, I've often said, I had it thrust upon me through school. It was really annoying that you had to live with these lies, just by virtue of the fact that the overwhelming majority are leftists as young men and women during education, right? It's brutal. I hated it as a young man. I mean, I remember Monday morning just going, oh, just sitting there going, I can't believe I have to do this again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Yeah.
and I you know, like it really kind of, and then of course you realize, oh man, better play the game because I got to go to college or
That was
something.
my experience too. I mean, my experience was very much, and look, I think that's why they pushed the college narrative so hard.
Ah,
Because what you would have gotten without that, if men saw any path forward that didn't require them to stick out this effeminate 12 years of schooling,
yeah,
they would have all checked out a long time ago. You know, we often talk about the kids in the inner city dropping out of school at a high rate.
sure.
In a way, they're kind of right. And what I mean by that is, you know, they weren't given the foresight of seeing the lie of, if you don't go to college, you'll be nothing in life, right? Because they
Right.
looked around them and they saw,
And that's a lie.
that's a lie.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
And
absolutely a lie.
so in a way, the only reason they're dropping out at insane rates, the young boys, right, are dropping out because, by the way, women in the inner city tend to make it through school, right, at much higher rates. The young boys are dropping out because the lie wasn't sold to them well enough, which is kind of an irony, right?
Huh. That's a really interesting way to look at it. I see your point. Cool. Yeah.
You know, the reality is they had to sell this lie to the rest of us that if you don't stay in school, then, you know, you're not going to be able to make a lot of money and you're not going to be able to get the things you want. You're not going to be able to. And by the way, in their minds, young people aren't stupid.
No.
Right. What they translate that to, because it's an effeminate culture built on vice, what they translate that to is more vice. Oh, if I don't make it through this effeminate 12 years of schooling, I'm not going to have the means to pursue all the vices that I want readily, right? I'm not going to be able to have the money to get the nice cars, to chase the women, to have the freedom to play 10 hours of video games a day. There's really the motive inside them when they're pushing through to make sure they go to college, to, you know, to be good little boys.
Yeah, I got to jump in because you just reminded me of something, and I think this is really, really true. Think about this for a second. I've often thought about this, but so you're a young guy in school, and you're just going, "Oh God, this is torture." I mean, it really is. It's torture, you know. And you're being marched around. The inefficiency, even as a young man, I was like, "Wow, the inefficiency around here." I was talking to my friend the other day. He homeschools. You know, I'm thinking to myself, I could probably get this done in about 2.5 hours at home, then go play basketball. You know, I remember thinking about that as a kid. I'm going, this is a crazy system.
Well, that's the government for you, right?
It's the government for you, right? They're
inefficient at everything.
So consider this. And, you know, I had the privilege of talking to a bunch of kids in the classroom setting a few years back who were kids who kind of messed up. And I informed them, they really identified with this. I said, let me guess. So you've been going to school your whole life, and very, very subtly, because you have not, you know, conformed to whatever ideology or whatever was told you. You were very subtly told that you'd make a good, janitor, toll booth collector, something like that. You know, what's ever going to become of you? You know, because your grades are horrible, and since they're fundamentally, and I'll debate this point till the cows come home, they're fundamentally anti-free market and socialist Marxist. These guys are in the union, you know, and the union. You look at their platform. I'm sorry, I don't think it's debatable, right? You know, you want to talk about it? Come on, debate us. So the point is, so they're told this. You have these people who are, by the way, are resentful towards capitalism, telling you have no place in this world, right? And now also that day in, day out, year in, year out. Now you're on day 14, and to the points you talked earlier. No dad at home, those kinds of things. Where they're going to find their man. It's a natural progression. It's how they get messed up. Whereas opposed when some guy walks in and tells them, you know, guys, the beauty of the free market is it's a meritocracy. And last I checked, you can make a lot of money welding, and or fill in anything. I don't care what it is, right? You can make a lot of money welding, and you do not need sociology 101 for welding whatsoever. So here's what you do. You work on your presentation skills. You work on writing, formulating ideas, because that will help you in every path of your life, whether that's, and that doesn't have to happen in school. You work on your personal appearance, how you present yourself. You work on your character, and you go out there and you weld, and you build a welding company. And that's just one stupid example. None of which needs soaps. Go ahead, take it.
I want to touch on that real quick, and then I want to drill down on solutions. But this is really important.
Sure.
We need a whole episode devoted to what I'm about to say.
Sure.
We have the education system completely backwards in our current order of society. Education is not utility, right? And I often use the phrase that we live in a society of utilitarianism.
That's a good word.
It's all about immediate functionality, right? Now, here's the problem. Until about 75 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, nobody viewed education that way. We saw education as the growth of the human soul. It doesn't matter if you have a specific plan for how you're going to use any of the information, any of the knowledge you acquire. Its primary purpose is to grow your soul.
Which was why most universities started out only offering theology and philosophy.
Right.
Keep going, or medicine or something.
But every knowledge, right? If you are madly in love with the physical sciences, if you're madly in love with welding, if you're madly in love with anything, right? And this is why they have to dumb you down so that you no longer can take a real interest in anything. Because the second you take an interest in anything and you dive into it, what happens is your soul just grows, right? You become a man of character.
Great point.
And we see this all the time. We see this with old wise men who maybe aren't educated in the modern sense of the word, right? They don't know trigonometry. They don't know all these things.
But they're wise.
And they're a plethora of knowledge in specific categories that are of interest to them.
You just explained something to me that I've always, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to. You just explained something to me that I've always thought, but you just articulated it perfectly. I was wondering why schools reward being a generalist, and society and the meritocracy does not reward being a generalist. They reward being a specialist. Go ahead, Bob, please.
And that's exactly it, right? If you can bore these kids to tears while finding a way to still cram into their head the specific knowledge that they'll need to be good widgets, right? good little utilitarians. What happens is you create a society of people with very little character who are easily controlled, right? Whereas men who take a great interest in the world that God made, simply because it exists, because it's phenomenal, those men are men of great character. And so one of the things I always tell young people is, because they say, well, I don't know what subjects I'm interested in. And, which obviously there's almost nothing that they can teach you in school that's very interesting, right? Because they present it in a way that isn't interesting. They don't want you to learn history because of history itself. They want you to learn history so that you know the things that you need to know to get a job and be a widget. So I always give the most contrarian advice to young kids. I was just talking to one of my nieces about this. She was nearly in tears talking about how she didn't have any subjects she loved. I said, what do you love? What do you love? And she thought for a minute, as if no one had ever asked her that before.
Oh, I bet no one
had ever asked her, what do you actually just love in life? She thought for about 10, 15 long seconds, and then her eyes lit up and she started talking about making things. She said, I took one woodshop class and it was the most fun thing I ever did. And she was talking about how she liked making things with wood, which I said, then you need to learn about that. If that's where your passion actually was for a moment in time and you really enjoyed it, just do that, right? It doesn't matter that it might not contribute to her specific path in life. What matters is her soul is going to grow and she's going to learn that there are things worth loving, right? That the world is an interesting place and that there are phenomenal things out there. Your soul expands with that kind of realization. Wow,
what great advice! And this is your niece, by the way.
That was one of my nieces.
And look at the counter cultural advice that you gave her, and probably blew her mind.
Oh yeah. I
You
mean,
know, it was like, whoa, like no one ever asked me that.
it was it was it was sad and exciting at the same time because, you know, one, I had never really had a long in-depth conversation with her before. You know, I'm her uncle-in-law, right? So it's just kind of, you know, hey. But for the first time, she lit up and we talked for 15, 20 minutes, and she was just exploding with excitement and just rambling about all these things that she liked all of a sudden. Um, she just lit up, and it was a really cool moment. And the reality is that's solution one. Solution one, if you're a parent and you want to counteract the culture does not want the growth of soul. They want you to be a utilitarianist. They want you to teach your kids facts that are useful. What
Wow. You know, okay,
and what you need to do is teach your kids to love, right? They
yeah.
need to be interested. They need to be fascinated by the world because the world is fascinating. All the time I spend with my daughters is just talking about all kinds of things. And they ask me these questions. My oldest daughter, my 4-year-old, has this routine that she's in now. 3 or 4 times a day, she'll say, Daddy, can I ask you another question? Then I'll say, you know, if it's the appropriate time, if I'm not doing something, I'll say, yes, what's your question? And she'll sit. Sometimes she doesn't even have one planned. So now she's got to think of one, and she'll go, um, why can we see things when there's light, but not when it's dark?
Great
Okay,
question.
let's go. And we'll talk
Wow.
about the light functions. And, you know, it's way over her head, but she's so interested. She's so intrigued by it. And then she'll find things within that she wants to drill down on. Right. And, you know, so why does the sun, and she's just interested in the world. And I've trained my kids to be interested in the world, so that simply for the growth of their soul. Right. Not because they're going to use that information. My daughter's not going to be a physicist. She doesn't actually need to know the deeper ways that light functions, right? But man, she loves the world that God made, and that's crucial. So that's step number one. That is just across the board. Every parent should be doing that really actively. Now, let's say it's step number two, by the way, if you're a parent and you want your young boys to actually be masculine men, if you want them to actually engage with the culture, to grow up and have an interest in engaging with the culture and not pull back to one side of despair or the other, you got to get them out of public school. And that's a hard one. You know, there's a million widgets that the current order of society has placed in your way.
Right. And we always talk about hitting the target. Okay. We realize that life's messy, that, you know, may not always be executable, but generally speaking, look, this is all about awareness, understanding the reality of it and moving accordingly. Go ahead.
Absolutely. One of the things I try to remind people, and I've done a lot of research on this. My old job was very much like data, right? I was a film and TV development executive. So my job was very data driven. I had to learn a lot about very specific things in order to understand what our next project needed to be and all of that. I love research. I've researched this a ton. Even if you can't homeschool your kids perfectly, even if you can't homeschool your kids well, right?
Yeah.
They will still be better off in whatever homeschooling you can provide for them, so long as you teach them to take an interest in things they love, right? The kids who do the best in life are the ones who, I know a family who they really struggle with homeschooling. They are not by any means big brains. They're not, neither the father nor the mother did very well in school. Those kids are some of the most interested, intelligent kids. Now, they might not be on the same level as other kids their age in regards to mathematics or something along those lines, but they function really well. They were over at my place one time helping me build something, and the young boys were able to put together geometry simply because the use of their reason was extremely strong, right? And so they were able to figure out the right angles that we needed in order to cut certain things to fit them together. They were functioning perfectly well, but they were extremely social. They were much better kids. And look, the reality is there is a major difference. Everyone says this that actually has real experience in this. There's a major difference between public school kids. And when I say public school, by the way, I also mean private school. I just mean
Right.
government school in general, because once private schools started taking government money, started taking money that the government would offer them in exchange for changing certain curriculum, doing certain things, they became government schools just with private names, right?
Yes.
There is no replacement for schooling in the home. Now, another version of schooling in the home is co-ops. There's a ton of families who have figured this out. They've realized, okay, unfortunately, we are trapped in a bit of a two-income family. Maybe the mom, has bought that lie and she's stuck there. But they say, you know what? I can roll my hours back, and I can provide a couple hours, a few hours a week. Dad can put in a few hours a week. But guess what? So can the other four families from our parish. And suddenly you have these little co-ops that are starting to form.
I've seen them work I have seen them firsthand, and the ones I have seen work tremendously.
Absolutely.
They work great.
So that's another great option. If you can't full-time homeschool, find people who are like-minded and, figure out a way to make it work. Look, human ingenuity is the greatest tool we have in the world. People will figure it out if they want to. If they genuinely understand the need, they will make it work.
I have to tell you, Bug. That again with outlining the general problem and then talking about solutions. I think we really spent a lot of time on one major part of the problem, and I think be honest with you, Mr. Hall, some of your words were extremely eloquent today. I mean it. You nailed some points very, very well. And what does it all come down to? It comes down to this. If you don't think your child is being indoctrinated by a bunch of godless Marxists or at least socialists, you are either willfully blind, asleep, or just thoroughly ignorant, and you need to change it.
Yeah.
This is bad. Okay, this is really, really bad. And COVID, as you pointed out, and you were so right. I love what you said, man. It's a good thing, guys. This is a good thing that the kids aren't in school. You know why? And I think that there is so much to it because these forces are very powerful and they're evil.
Yeah. Well,
evil.
Here's the catch, right? And I'm always trying to think outside the box as far as motives and intentions. Look, we were hitting a point where a lot of people were disillusioned by the government school system, right? In a weird way, by creating the false dichotomy that Democrats want to shut down public schools and conservatives think that they should stay open, because conservatives at the time just wanted the anti-COVID fight reasonably, right? They wanted to fight all of the mandates that were coming down.
Sure.
It's kind of an irony that they were able to convince the conservatives just by that dichotomy, just by creating a fight, that they should be fighting for public schools. When most of them right before COVID were at the point where they were saying public schools are
useless
to the core and useless at this point. They were pushing homeschool. They were pushing alternative schools. They were pushing a voucher system, right?
Right.
School choice, all of these things. And then all of a sudden, they completely switched that narrative and started going, no, the public schools are where we should be, and you need to open them back up. We got to stop falling.
Interesting point.
We've got to stop falling for these dichotomies. We have to start trying to slow down and be reasonable and see the good where it is and go, great. You know what? They did our work for us.
Another great point, Bug. You just pointed it out. The binary. Everything is presented as the binary. And keep going. Sorry, we're wrapping it up here.
We'll wrap it up. I want to touch on a couple more little solutions.
Sure.
And then I want to drill down on entertainment. I think that's one we could really, really, really dig into and chew the fat on, I think, for a little bit. But if you're not a parent, if you're a young man who, let's say you're in your mid to late 20s or even getting up into your 30s, and you can honestly look at this and say, I definitely fall into this category, right? The failure to launch category.
Mm-hmm.
There's some there's some very practical things you can do to get moving. I see a lot of these guys that seem like they're sort of frozen in time,
right?
And they can no longer see their way forward. They feel like they've missed some boat, whatever.
Yeah.
Step number one is you have to think like an ascetic, right? You have to look at all of these cheap pleasures in your life as an infringement on your dignity and masculinity.
Great advice.
And it's a hard thing to do, man. I was a video game junkie. I mean, I've always had problems with cheap pleasures. That was before my conversion. That was my problem. Man, video games. I mean, I could go a day and a half, right? And one day, it was right after my conversion. One day I said, this is problematic. This is not helping me get to heaven. It's not helping me become a man of character. This is doing nothing for me. And I just went cold turkey. I didn't touch a video game joystick for, I think, 3 or 4 years. Not one, right? And the cool thing that happens is it's an easy purge once you do it. Because if you do play video games, you know what I'm talking about. If you miss a year or so, the gap is so far. I remember after 4 years, I was at someone's house and they were playing something. Yeah. It was like the third iteration of a game I used to play fanatically. And I was like, you know what? I'm free of this curse. I'll jump in and play a quick game with you guys. Why not? It'll be fun. Lost. Not to brag, but I mean, I used to be very, very good at video games. And all of a sudden, I was like the old man in the room. I couldn't, and I went, that's kind of a blessing. Even if I wanted to get back into this addiction, the trouble of getting back into it is too difficult, right?
I know. That's great. So I not to rush you, but I think that is tremendous advice. You got another one? I mean, video games, get rid of them. It's a waste of time. What's the other one? Porn. That's a whole nother show.
Even all the cheap entertainment, as a man, you have to start recognizing where you're indoctrinated, right? Yes. You have to start recognizing that these things, even if you intellectually reject them, if you're constantly ingesting them, they are gonna hinder your growth. I was a big sort of woe is me biker guy. I don't know. I had this self-image that was a completely false image. And part of that image was sitting around listening to, Bob Seger and his Lonely Man Against the World. I love Bob Seger, man. I won't listen to Bob Seger anymore. I won't listen to the music that I know moves my emotions towards that old false reality.
Oh, great, right? A great point. If you're a huge fan of the Grateful Dead and that moves your emotion to dropping acid and smoking weed, probably not a good idea if you're serious about being a man.
Yeah,
right?
But even the little things, because Bob Seger Bob Seger and the Allman Brothers and all these great bands that I loved, they didn't influence me to commit any sins.
No.
They influenced my image of myself, the emotional aspect of myself that said, I'm this lonely biker who's too cursed to ever be loved, and I'm just a lonely man upon the road. That whole thing.
Coming in from the cold outside.
Right. You know these guys.
Actually, you just nailed the ones I loved. Allman Brothers, Seeger, Skinner.
That's myself. So look, I cut it all out. One year, I did it for Lent one year. I said no music of any kind whatsoever. I sat and listened to Father Ripperger all Lent. That was the only thing I allowed myself was, either sermons or whatever.
Right.
And when Lent was over, I listened to a Bob Seger song and my emotions immediately swelled and I recognized the pull. I recognized being pulled to that false self-image. And I said, I don't want to be that person. Why would I allow my emotions to be pulled in that direction?
And recognize the payoff of those emotions.
That's exactly it. And I said, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen to me as a man. I don't know what God has in store for me. I had a slight fear that because my self-image was very strong. I had a fear of being annihilated, right? But I realized what was being annihilated was the made-up version of myself. It was all of the ridiculousness that I had foisted on myself, that I had harmed myself with. And annihilation was the right approach. So I stopped watching most movies, most TV shows. I listened to no music until that part of me was gone, right? Or at
Wow.
least as gone as I could get it. And I remember meeting people, old friends that I hadn't talked to in years, and them really being baffled by, saying like, you have become more of a different person than anyone I've ever met. Like the difference between you when I knew you just 3-4 years ago and now, it's like I'm talking to a completely different person. And I'm not saying that all of you need to go out and become a completely different person, but if the person that you think you are is problematic, maybe you need to just let loose and let God do the work, because maybe He does have a completely different idea for you in mind.
Yes. And
Right?
your suggestions, is particularly when we transition to the solutions based this. Number one, get rid of what's going into your head. Maybe get rid of these video games, turn them off. I mean, it's huge. Number two, be careful of what you're letting into your skull in terms of things that are going to, like you always, Father River just says, the dog with the rag. This thing pulling you around, and understand these things and take responsibility for your agency, man. Like really understand that this is full on war to achieve. If you want to get to if you want to get to spiritual and salvation, you're going to have to understand this. But
And
I think that was a great
there's
advice.
one more. There's one more that I want to touch on. Get married. Stop with all the excuses. Stop. Look, the current order of society has a huge lie, and I talked to at least 20 guys who say the same thing. Well, I can't get married until I have a certain level of financial such and such, until I've reached a certain point. Look, if people throughout time believed that, no one would have ever gotten married.
That's right. And you got to marry the right girl, and that takes a lot of work.
The world lived on the brink of starvation. They lived on nothing. They lived on what we would consider abject poverty for most of the time. Men did not say, well, I need to be making $100,000 a year before I can get married. Well, I need to have a small fiefdom before I'm able to get married. They understood that marriage is their primary means of maturity and sanctification, right? Yes. So you need to get all the stuff that's going to infringe on that out of your life, but then you need to get married as soon as you can. And
to the right girl.
Well, to the right girl. But here's the thing. This is the big problem. The big problem is that what men believe is the right girl.
Right.
Nowadays, they have such a ridiculous standard.
That's correct.
And women do it and men do it. Oh, there's no good ones left. There's no good ones left. If you make one qualification, the only qualification, which is this woman devoted to Holy Mother Church, and is her main goal in life to get to heaven, right? That's it. If that is true, then she's the right girl. And you need to stop with all of it. Men are very, very disordered in this way. You have got to stop with all of the social standards of beauty. You need to stop with all the social standards of what a super, because trads do this too. Like, what's the super mom standard, right? Does she know how to do all these things that women knew how to do 100 years ago? Look, you're not going to find that woman, and all that's doing is excusing you from entering into the sacrament, which will be your primary means of sanctification. Yes. I had this great priest. He's just a holy man, and I was outside. I had just had a daughter, my first daughter. We were outside of church, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was like in his early to mid 30s and hadn't gotten married. And this priest was talking to me about my daughter, and he said, "Oh, I bet she's going to be a mother superior someday." And I was kind of beaming over that and talking about family life and the difficulty and the growth and just having a nice conversation. My friend was just sort of standing there off to the side, and this priest out of nowhere finally turned to my friend and said, "Why aren't you married?" Just like that. And the guy goes, well, yeah, I mean, I haven't found the right girl, kind of like, muddling his way through. And he goes, "Stop it. Get married." Get married. He said, "Don't you understand that it's nearly impossible for you to get to heaven without fulfilling your state in life?" And the guy goes, and he goes, "Look, it's possible." He goes, "But it's a lot harder." He goes, "Take the easy path. Get married." And what he meant by that, the easy path, is it's the hard path, right?
Oh, yeah.
The hard path is what gets us to heaven. The easy path very often does not get us to heaven, right? And
if I could
to say,
yes,
but it's backed up by an innumerable amount of quotes from saints and everything else.
yes, and actually, I would say pragmatically, and to look at it not from societal standards and what they hold in value, but to really look at it from a standpoint of salvation. You're 100% right. These particularly marriage and some of these other things, that's a whole nother topic, because you're not suggesting walking into this cavalierly. What you're suggesting, and rightly so, is that this is the natural order, contrary to the cultural zeitgeist now, which is waking up every day thinking of me. Some of the comments we got on the last show are like Handmaiden's Tale, like, what do you guys know? Shut up, all that kind of stuff, which, by the way, brings another point. Love to debate you guys. We're not looking to offend anyone. We want to have real substantive debate on ideas backed by facts. Okay, that's going to be the deal. So, Bug, I want to leave it there. I tell you nailed it again. Thank you, my friend. It was excellent. I loved what you said, particularly about the marriage thing, because I laugh at it sometimes, because nothing has ever squared me away more than the responsibility and the beauty and gift of having a child and going, man, that's it. I got my purpose in life. It was surreal when that first happened. I went, wow. So this is what I'm supposed to do. And it's sad that we're so selfish as a society. We're missing that. Go ahead, Bug. Give the last word.
Well, I was just going to say this. I love all my brothers and sisters in Christ. I love them all dearly. There's sort of this secret poking that traditionally minded men who have devoted themselves to family and whose family is growing rapidly, because they just tend to do that when you let them, right?
Yep.
There is a major dichotomy between those men and the perpetually single traditional men. Though even the ones who are, Latin mass goers and everything else, there is a major, major difference in perspective. And this is not to denigrate those guys, because it's an accident of history, and we have all been lied to the culture, right?
Right. And what do we always say? What do we do now?
What do we do now, right? What do we do now? But I will say this, once you have taken that leap and you have started to live that life, the difference is so obvious. Not just the difference in your level of virtue, but your ability to recognize errors in the world. Like, everything just changes. Marriage and the ardor of raising kids and the ardor of creating a peaceful home devoted to God just does the work for you.
Yes.
It really does. It just does the work for you. Let it work for you, man. Like, get out there, take the medicine that's going to heal you.
All right, man. That was great. Bug, my friend. Seriously, that was honestly, man, dude. Mr. Hall, it's always an honor to talk to you, my friend.
Maughan, I'll see you next time, huh?
Well, and we will see you next time. And this is Jim Maughan with my good friend, Mr. Bug Hall. And we're gonna say goodbye this time. We'll see you next show. Probably gonna be talking about the entertainment industry quite in depth.
I think that's a good one to drill down on, all the various aspects of the entertainment industry. And as I always say, pray much and suffer well.
And Viva Cristo Rey, my friend. See you guys next time.